Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Hey guys, welcome back to Sela Social Studies. Today we're going to be talking about the Compromise of 1877, otherwise known as the Great Betrayal. Now, there were a series of events that led to the demise of Reconstruction in 1877. Regardless of the reasons, the extinguishing of Reconstruction ended whatever forward progress African Americans had made until then and jeopardized any progress that could be made in the future. Reconstruction had some successes. However, Reconstruction as a whole had been ineffective at best, with the Great Betrayal placing conservative governments back in place in the South. The downward spiral of Jim Crow segregation would begin. The American Civil War drained the country's economy as a whole. Congress had needed to pay millions of soldiers, pay for a railroad, and build weapons for a war that took 4 years. Now they had to readmit the southern states back into the Union while rebuilding a nation that had been scarred by war. Less than a decade after the war, the Depression of 1873 struck the country. The northern merchant economy felt the worst of the Depression. Since the South had seceded from the Union, they had to create their own economy and monetary system. After the end of the war, it was the North who was burdened with paying the bills of Reconstruction. When the Depression struck the North, they could no longer afford the costs of Reconstruction. Reconstruction started the year after the Civil War ended, and Reconstruction would be a money and military vacuum for 12 years. Northerners were getting fatigued by the time of the election of 1876 came around. In the beginning, Northern Americans were excited about helping the freed slaves and putting the United States back together. They felt that it was their duty as Americans, and it was important and exciting. By the mid to late 1870s, they felt like the goal that they had set out on could never be accomplished. Their feeling was that the South would never change its views on African Americans. Another aspect of Reconstruction that was straining the North was the length of time that the military had been tied up in occupying the southern states. Women missed their husbands, and parents missed their children. There would only be a few times that families could be reunited in the 1860s and 70s. Northerners wanted their soldiers back home. It didn't help that after Andrew Johnson was impeached and left the presidency, that President Grant did not have a very successful presidency. He had some failures. President Grant and his administration did not do any favors for the election of 1876. Grant was the war hero who, after President Johnson, was the nation's pick to lead the country. Grant's personal life and his choices for his administration became embroiled in scandals. Grant had been known as an alcoholic and was unable to police his friends that he placed in his cabinet. A notable scandal that plagued Grant's presidency was the credit mobilier scandal. Key administration members had arranged for the Credit Mobilier Holding Company to receive money and government land to build a railroad out west, and in return, bribes were given and the railroad was never built. America saw how little control Grant had on the Republican Party. After 8 years of the Republican administration of Ulysses S. Grant and his scandalous presidency, the Republican Party began to lose its influence. Southern Democrats, who were once hated in America, began to gain national prominence. This leads us to the election of 1876. The corruption of President Grant had placed the Republican Party in a predicament. They were suffering, and the Democrats realized that they had the opportunity to regain the political power that had escaped them since before the war and the election of Abraham Lincoln, and they felt that with the right candidate, they could be victorious. In the election of 1876, the Republicans put the governor of Ohio, Rutherford B. Hayes, against New York Democrat Samuel Tilden. In the election of 1876, the winner needed to accumulate 185 electoral college votes. Towards the end of the election, the Democrat Tilden was leading the popular vote by 250,000 votes and had a substantial lead in the electoral vote with 184. Three southern states consisting of 20 electoral ballots, Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana, had yet to cast their electoral votes because of a dispute, and Tilden needing only one vote, that it had seemed that he had the election all but wrapped up. Hayes would need to win all 20 electoral votes to win the election. In order to decide the outcome of the election, a committee was put in charge of resolving the disputes. The committee consisted of 8 Republicans and 7 Democrats. These 15 men made a compromise that would change the outcome of the election and the direction of the United States for the next 100 years. The Compromise of 1877, otherwise known as the Great Betrayal, put Republican Rutherford B. Hayes in office. Had the election had been honest, the Democrat Tilden would have been victorious. When the Compromise of 1877 was complete, it effectively ended Reconstruction. The heart and soul of Reconstruction as a whole was not the Freedmen's Bureau, but the Military Reconstruction Acts of 1867. It was the military in the South that was protecting African Americans and helping them gain political office. Without the military presence in the South, Reconstruction might not have happened. Now, the compromise consisted of several parts. In a compromise, both sides of the argument have to gain in some manner. Northerners and Republicans got the presidency, with Hayes being elected president. In return, the Southern Democrats got a railroad that connected Texas and California, but most importantly, they got the removal of the federal forces from the South, thus effectively ending Reconstruction as we knew it. I'll see you next time.